I have been playing around with learning targets and outcomes and learning mastery in Canvas, and I just wanted to share some thoughts. This is a work in progress, so just take that for what it's worth. Take it with a grain of salt. But I just want to explore a little bit and share a few things. I have made up a number of modules for my course for statistics. And in my first module, chapter 1, in the book it's called Stat Starts Here, but I and my colleague agreed that on learning targets, and we agreed that we would call the learning target for that unit context matters. So that is the first learning target. Now, what I've done is I've gone into outcomes in Canvas in order to specify my learning targets. I have my course name at the very top, and then under that I guess I clicked on the course name and then clicked on create, and that let me create this learning target group. And then in the learning target group I created a number of outcomes. I'm sorry, in this outcome group, which is called learning targets, I created a bunch of outcomes. And the way I did that is when I selected that group, I hit this plus, create. And by the way, the next one on my list was going to be normal distribution. So I'll just go ahead and add that, normal distributions. And when you go to create your outcome, you can put in sort of a rubric to show what proficiency rating, different what numbers, what is the meaning of different numbers. You can specify here. I just left these with the default. I may change them. And Canvas also asks you to specify which of the number ratings do you consider to be mastery. And in this case, it's kind of obvious. Well, the one that's called mastery is mastery. And if you get a 4, then you've gone beyond mastery. Yay! And then there is the calculation method, and you can choose any number of calculation methods. And I'm just leaving their default decaying average, and maybe in a little bit I'll show you another option. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And so now I've got yet another outcome. Strangely, it added it somewhere in the middle. I guess they're doing it by alphabetical order. Whatever, that's fine. So anyway, so now I've got my outcome group called learning targets, and then I've got a number of outcomes that I've specified, and each outcome has sort of a rubric associated with it. Now, when I go in to my modules and I decide to create an assignment, so I'm going to go into this first module, chapter 1, and I'm going to create an assignment. And we're going to assume that this assignment is sort of formative, and we'll call it maybe first formative. Maybe it's reading. Let's call it something. Read chapter 1 and take notes, something like that. Add. That's formative. Okay, and then we'll go into that guy, and we'll give it a rubric. We don't have to, but I'm going to go ahead and do find rubric. And I'm going to look for my course, which is stats planning. And I've been fooling around with this, so I have more than one. Let me see if I can stretch this out and see which one's which. I think I want the Mastery 1 rubric. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and let me see if I can save that and show you how to use this rubric. Okay, so I chose the Mastery 1 rubric in this assignment, which is formative. And so then I'll go ahead and I'll publish that guy. And let's see here. The other thing we'll do is we'll do another assignment. And the next assignment we'll consider to be summative. So I will do assignment, create assignment. Let's call it quiz. I already had a quiz in there. I'll call this quiz 2. I add item. There was a quiz there, but don't worry about it. Anyways, let's go ahead and look at quiz 2. And for this one, we will also do a rubric, and we'll find it, and we'll choose from stats planning, a rubric that I've already created, and I'll use that rubric. And then I'm in pretty good shape. So I think that's all set up the way I want. And then I've got these two assignments. One is formative and one is, oh, and I'll publish both. One is formative and one is summative. By the way, let's go in and really tweak that. Oh, I want to show you guys something. In assignments, I have made it so there's basically two groups, two assignment groups. One called formative, one called mastery. Formative is 0% of the grade and mastery is 100% of the grade. When I go to look at my module, what I've done is I made the first assignment, or I didn't do it yet, but I'm going to. I'm making the first assignment worth 4 points, but it's formative, so it will not count towards the final grade, and the assignment group will be formative instead of mastery. And then I'll go ahead and I'll save that, and then we'll go back to modules, and I'll go into my summative assignment, and I will edit that, and I will make that worth 4 points, and I will make that mastery so it's part of my 100% that actually does count towards the grade, and then I'll go ahead and I'll save that. Okay, now I've got my modules and I've got my two assignments that I'm interested in. One's formative, one's summative, both are worth 4 points. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to make sure those guys end up in my Learning Mastery Gradebook. So if I go to grades, normally I will see the traditional gradebook, and here we can see it. But I'm going to go and switch to the Learning Mastery Gradebook. And here I can see, here's my test student. And so I entered a couple of sample context matters outcomes, but we're going to try and do a different one so you can see what happens. So let's assume that we do this as categorical data as my outcome that I'm looking for. And right now no entries have been made. So I will go back to modules. And let's see here. We need to associate the correct outcome with these guys. So what I'm going to do is, good. Okay, my mastery rubric, when I originally made it, and I apologize, I didn't show you this. Maybe I'll go back and I'll show you how I can edit the rubric. I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I'm editing the rubric. What you can do, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this criteria, and I'm going to say find outcome, learning targets. We're going to do categorical data, and then I'm going to choose for that. Everything else has already been designed for categorical data for that outcome. So I'm going to say import. So that's how I make the rubric. And then I'll use this rubric for grading, and then I'll update rubric. Now it's changing the name because I'm going to have to figure out how to actually save the rubric and reuse it over and over again. I think I have an idea, but for right now, cut me some slack. So anyways, if you look at quiz 2, I'm using the same criteria from my Mastery 1 rubric, and it is based, it's based on the wrong outcome. It's based on context matters. So I will fix that. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to find outcome, and I'm going to go to my learning targets and choose categorical data, and then use this criteria for scoring. I don't have to. I actually could have turned that off on that last one. On this one, I probably should actually use it for scoring. I'll have to fiddle around with what it means use for scoring versus use this rubric for grading. I think the use for scoring is when you have more than one criteria. So if we had another criteria here, then I could use some of these criteria for scoring on this rubric, and some of the criteria I don't have to use. Since I only have one criteria, I'm going to use it for scoring, so I'm glad that I had that box checked on that other thing. Now, am I going to use this rubric for assignment grading? That I'm not entirely sure what it does, but I'm going to say yes. And okay, I'm in pretty good shape. Let's go back to modules. So now I've got categorical data in my rubric. And when I go back to read chapter 1 and take notes, I've also got categorical data, so I'm in pretty good shape. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to do some grading for test student. So I'm going to go to test student, and since there has been no grade entered yet, I'm going to view the rubric, and you have to choose one of these. Let's say that on the formative, they did the work, but their notes weren't that good. So I gave them a 3. So we're going to hit save. And I think that's all that needs to be done there. Oh, maybe I'll hit submit as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close that. That was read chapter 1. That's the formative assignment. And then I'm going to come down here to quiz 2. And I'm going to go to speed grader. And for test student, I'm going to put in a 4. They did really good when they took the quiz. Yay. I'm going to view the rubric. Actually, I shouldn't have given them 4. I should have gone here to the rubric, put in 4, hit save. Now that's how you get the 4. In fact, let me see what happens if let's do that one more time. Let's go 3 and then save. Yeah, that updates that there. View rubric, let's put in 4, save, updates up there. Great. Okay. So now I've entered a couple of scores, and let's take a look and see. So back to modules. We've got these 2 assignments where outcomes have been graded. And so now let's go to look at the gradebook, and let's look at learning mastery. Now you'll notice that it says, now remember, I only made it so that the grading was based on the summative, not the formative. So this 3 point, oh, wait a second. Maybe I didn't. Why else would it be 3.6? Why would it be 3? Oh, I know why it's 3.65. I had it set for decaying average, not average. So it's not 4 plus 3 divided by 2. It's weighting the 4 as 65%, weighting the 3 as 35%. So anyways, it's using decaying average, and it seems to be including the formatives assignment as well. So let's fix that up. I'm going to go back to modules, and I'm going to go into this formative dude. And let's see here. Let's go edit. Oh, wait a second. I think this might be a rubric thing. Let me double check. Let's go to edit the rubric. And let's say don't use this rubric for assignment grading. Maybe that's the one. I'm going to say that. Okay. And then let's go back to speed grader and just double check and make sure it's still listed as a 3 out of 4. Okay, so that's good. Let's see here. Okay. And then let's go back in. Well, just changing that one thing might make the difference. So let's take a look at the gradebook. That does not seem to have updated this. Interesting. I've got to figure out why it's including both assignments under categorical data. Let's see here. In the meantime, before I do that, so I don't forget, I would like to show how to make it so that it turns this into a 4 instead of a 3.65. We can go into outcomes, and under outcomes I can go into categorical data, and instead of using the grading methodology of decaying average, I could say, well, what if I use most recent score? And by the way, there are several other options like n number of times, but I'm going to use most recent score. In this case, the most recent score is definitely a 4. Again, if we go back and look for these 2 assignments, read chapter 1 and quiz 2, I gave a 3 for the read chapter 1 and a 4 for the quiz 2. So let's take a look at the gradebook now that I updated that outcome. And now you can see, okay, so the latest assignment was a 4. So that worked. So all I got to figure out is how do I make it so that that formative assignment does not show up in here. So I'm going to pause the video and I'll get right back to you. Okay, I think I figured a few things out. I'm just going to play around here with you so you can see what my experiments looked like. I think the question that I was asking was in the Learning Mastery Gradebook, how do I make it so that my formative assignments are not included in this outcome here, and only the mastery or the summative assignments are. I think one easy way to do that is just don't assign an outcome to the formative. But the thing that I realized is I like assigning an outcome to the formative because when I do, it automatically helps me to create the rubric. I don't have to do that from scratch. Now, I could always make up some boilerplate rubric that's not an outcome. That's another option. But it does look like like there's some interesting things that happen when you fiddle around with the rubric. So when I go to the rubric here, by the way, let's notice that the Learning Mastery book right now is based on, I think it's based on decaying average, and I believe that 4 was the latest assignment that counts towards the outcome. Let's take a look and see what happens if I play around with this. So let's see here. The quiz was scored at 4, and I have not been changing that. The quiz is scored at 4, and I'm leaving that. Fine. In the modules, the read chapter 1 is now currently, let's make it so that it is scored at 2, which means that it's kind of interesting that when we go to look at grades, that we see 4 out of 3. Okay, we're not doing the decaying average, but if we go to outcomes and we look at the learning targets and we look at categorical data, it says we are doing decaying average. So what happened was I did figure out a way to make it so that I can use the categorical data outcome, but it doesn't have an impact on the decaying average grading methodology for the Learning Mastery Gradebook. So let's see how I did it. So I was fiddling around with these settings here. When you go in and you edit your rubric, there are several different settings here, and there's actually more if I uncheck these boxes. And I did find a web page in Canvas. It was called How Do I Add a Rubric to an Assignment? And in this web page, and you could just Google that, they have all of these check boxes here with numbers, and then they have explanations. And essentially what I got out of this is that if you click on Don't Post Outcomes Results to Learning Mastery Gradebook, I think that means that it's not included. Now, I think it is a little trickier than that because I did have to fiddle around with a few of these. Remove points from rubric is a different thing. That actually just makes it so that the point numbers are not shown in the rubric and just the descriptions are. And then use this rubric for assignment grading. I think that has to do with, let me see if I can show you. So let's get rid of this. And let's go, you can see I'm doing both. So it's both those check boxes. I'm going to go back up here to my speed grader. And right now you can see that there's a 2 there. And I believe what happens is that if I go in here and I edit the chapter 1, if I make it so that we don't use this rubric for assignment grading, let's see what happens. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to refresh this page. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to view the rubric, and I'll try to change it to a 3. You can see it changes there, and then I'll hit save. And you can see it does not update it there. And in fact, if I leave that as nothing, I think it's not going to do anything. Let's do view rubric. I'll change it to a 1. Hit save. It does not update this. So it seems to me that setting here where you say use this rubric for assignment grading, if it's unchecked, then you can check things on the rubric, but it will not give a grade to the assignment. So I'm not exactly sure what effect that has, but that is one thing to play with. So anyways, let's go back and let's check that box and say update rubric. And again, so you can see what's checked, I say don't post outcomes results to Learning Mastery Gradebook. Now let's lower the number, and remember we're using decay and average. So I'm going to go to view rubric, and I'm going to go and change this to a 1 and hit save. And this time I think the 1 will show because I had that box checked, use this rubric for assignment grading. But when I go to Gradebook, I'm hoping that it did not change the Mastery Learning Outcome grade. Let's take a look. So grades, and we're left with just 4. We're not using a decaying average. If we were, that 1 would have brought the 4 down. Now, just to test my theory, let's go back. Let's go back to modules and to chapter 1. And let's go in and let's make it so we do post outcomes. And I don't know if it's going to change it right away or if I have to go back into SpeedGrader, but let's see what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. We're going to go back to the Gradebook and see if it changed right away. So it did not change right away. So I think we will go back in and just double check. Let's do this. Let's go modules, and we'll go to read chapter 1. And if I look at the rubric, how we edited it, we should be using the outcome in the Mastery Gradebook. So I'm going to go back to SpeedGrader. And I don't know why it did not use that, but we're going to regrade just to be safe. So there's 3, there's 1, hit save, and submit just to be safe. And then let's go back and see if that changes the Learning Mastery Gradebook. Yeah, it did. So basically, we now are using the decaying average, and we have a 4 for the latest assignment and a 1 for an earlier assignment. So what am I going to recommend here? Let's have some conclusions here. What I'm thinking is that if I in my rubric, when I create it, I will definitely find an outcome to specify the criteria. And for my formative, I will say don't post outcomes results to Learning Mastery Gradebook, but I will use the rubric for assignment grading. So I think that's what I'm going to stick with. And then if we go to modules and we look at the summative or the mastery assignment, I will then go in and edit the rubric, and you will see that I am posting the outcomes, and I am using the rubric for assignment grading. And I think that is a pretty good overall feel of how to use Canvas in order to get this, this Learning Mastery Gradebook to work properly. I don't know if I fixed that yet. I feel like before I end this video, I'd like to make it so that that guy no longer is included. So if I go back to my rubric, and that's no longer included there, so I'm just going to regrade just to be safe. Let's go, okay, we're going to view the rubric. We're going to say, yep, it's 1, and we will save, and we will submit just to be safe. And then I'm going to go back to the gradebook, and I'm hopeful. There we go. So we are not including the formative assignment in the in this 4 out of 3 here, in the 4 out of 3, the outcome, but we are including the mastery or the summative assignment. Okay, so that's kind of my overall gist of it. You've got outcomes down here. You've got, let's see here, you've got your Learning Mastery Gradebook here. In your outcomes, you want to specify a outcome group and a bunch of outcomes. And in your outcomes is where you will specify things like the proficiency rating and points and the calculation method. And then you've got your Learning Mastery Gradebook, and that's where you'll see the results of all this. And when you're going into individual assignments, you will make sure that for the individual assignment, you will specify whether it's formative or mastery. And you'll want 2 assignment groups for that. Actually, you can go to assignments and do that. And you'll have your assignment groups and their appropriate weighting. And then once you've decided something's formative, you will go ahead and make a rubric, and you will import the appropriate outcome and import. And then after you do, you'll check these 2 boxes for formative assignments. And then if you're dealing with a summative or a mastery assignment, you will edit your rubric, you will import the particular outcome, import, and then you will only check this box, use this rubric for assignment grading. Do not check the one that says don't post outcomes. Okay, I am hopeful that that is enough to get you and I started on trying to use Canvas as a tool for monitoring mastery grading. Let us pray.